Hi everyone, here's the Bookends once again, taking a break from rehearsing the discussion of my master's thesis, which is this bad motherfucker, to talk to you about everybody's favorite literary current that might or might not actually exist, post-postmodernism. Some time ago, about 1 year ago, I filmed a video about what was kind of an introduction into the main theories behind postmodernist literature, and then I filmed a video about a few books that worked very well as introductions into postmodernist literature. I'm talking about fiction books, primary sources, if you know what I'm talking about. Then I filmed a video about the main theories behind what is post-postmodernist literature, and then I didn't film an introduction to, like a suggestion video about post-postmodern books, mostly because no one really knows what the fuck post-postmodern is supposed to be. Like, in the suggestions I gave you people about postmodernist literature were all books that, when you read them, you go, oh well, this is fucking postmodernism. When you read If on a Winter's Night a Traveler by Italo Calvino, when you read 100 Years of Solitude by Garcia Marquez, you go, okay, this shit is postmodern, I know this. But the books I'm going to suggest you today, well, if you're an uninformed reader, if you're an everyday person who has a job outside an English department, you probably won't even notice that there's much odd with them, at least in many of these cases. That's why originally I didn't even want to film a video like this one, suggesting you post-postmodern books that maybe are not even post-postmodern at all. People still haven't decided what the whole thing is, but at the same time many of you requested it, so take this video as a suggestion video about so many awesome, incredible contemporary works that you love to bits, no matter what you think about post, whatever the fuck. One thing before I begin, if you want to know more about post-postmodernism, what the whole thing is, consider checking my video about the whole topic. I don't remember what I say in it because that's how good a scholar I am. And if you want to read something about it, but not much, consider reading Andrew Albrecht's very short essay, introductory essay after postmodernism, which introduces the topic in a very clear manner, and it's still a golden reading. Now, if you feel like diving into the world of post-postmodernism, which rejects some ideas of postmodernism proper, goes back a bit to classic literature, 19th century literature, but also uses some very contemporary literary devices in weird ways, your best bet is to start with The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz, most notably because this also happens to be the best book of all times, hands down. It's a book that casts the reader in an active role, that requires readers to take an active role in order to judge the whole of the events, to understand the whole of the events. It's a book that makes you think and makes you act and makes you cry a lot. Another very po-mo thing about this book is the way it handles genre fiction, popular culture, low culture, re-evaluating and rehabilitating it in ways that differ from the literature of the past, which kind of said that low culture has its place too, even though it's shit. Post-postmodernism usually makes a point that low culture is not low in any way and it's not shit, it just functions on a different level than other things like high culture, but it's still dominated by the same tendency toward ambitiousness and innovation and evolution, and by the same monetary rules as the rest of culture. But again, beyond all that, this is an amazing book in the first place. I mean, it's really one book that anytime I think about it or I talk about it, I can't help but go back and read at least a few pages. It's really heart-shattering and it's beautiful. Another book that works pretty much like that is The Marriage Plot, which is a book I have suggested to countless people in my life, and everybody came back to me telling me how awesome I am. The Marriage Plot is quite different from Oscar Wilde. It's a much more straightforward reading, and if you're not comfortable with this whole idea of postmodernism, if the term makes you a bit, I don't know if I like it, you should start with The Marriage Plot, which goes back to 19th century literature and talks a lot about the idea of marriage in classic literature and in everyday life, but still discusses some ideas of postmodern philosophy and the literature, and still has a recognizably contemporary vibe. Jeffrey Eugenides, the author, famously said that his generation read postmodernists and enjoyed them, enjoyed their rebellion against classic literature, but didn't really know what they were rebelling against. And when they found out about, for instance, 19th century literature, they saw how beautiful the whole thing is. Another author who moves on a similar axis is Jonathan Franzen, of course, and of course The Corrections is another awesome starting point into the world of post-postmodernism, a book that goes back to the classic idea of the 19th century family saga, and it goes beyond the slightly Pynchonian first novels by Franzen. The marriage plot is better, if you ask me, all the same. The only people I think don't really like this book are old-time Jeffrey Eugenides fans, because it's not as quirky as his first novel, The Virgin Suicidals and Middlesex. Another book with a very classic vibe, and a book everyone would appreciate it, even if they can't stand experimental fiction and that kind of stuff, is A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan, a masterpiece and a bit of an experimental book in a very subtle way, in the way it mixes two quite post-postmodern forms. The first form is the short story collection that is not a short story collection at all, but is in fact actually kind of a novel made by individual short stories. That's a form that lots of people use. Junot Diaz uses it, Michael Chabon uses it. It will be like interesting to research the importance of this form in post-postmodernism, but not that interesting at all, so let's hope somebody does it, but not me. And the other thing the Visit from the Goon Squad does is to use images, pics, other narrative media. You have these PowerPoint presentations within the text. Postmodern texts love to do that, and to use these quirky ideas and to mix different medium and to play with all that. But always in a very reader-friendly way, in a way that carries on the plot and the main idea of the book. It's not the disruptive experiments of postmodernism that fucked up the whole thing, even though those postmodern examples too can be hugely rewarding and hugely fascinating and entertaining. I don't want to sound like David Foster Wallace rejecting all his fathers and shit. If you're interested in this kind of quirky mixing of, you know, different medium, weird books with lots of pictures and things you have to do to the book in order to understand it, of course, why am I ill in July? Of course, House of Leaves is the book for you. House of Leaves, it's a bit more complicated and a bit less approachable than all these books, but it makes up for all that with the sheer fascination of having this huge, terrifying experience of a book in your home, this beautiful artifact to look at and to browse, and with its compelling plot and its beautiful characters. I'm not sure it's a great introduction to postmodernist literature, as in, if you've never read any other of these books, maybe you won't like House of Leaves, but it embraces the whole postmodern idea of being as quirky as postmodernism while being enjoyable in a brilliant way. Another book that mixes images and written fiction fruitfully and combines the two in a very interesting way is Extremely Loud, Incredibly Close by Safran Foer, but I don't like that book very much, so I won't talk about it. It exists, know that. One of the things that interests me the most about postmodern literature is the way it handles popular narrative forms and other narrative forms like comic books, like games, like all these kinds of things. And when it comes to that, your man is Michael Chabon, today's best living writer today's best living writer, fuck it. And Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay is probably the place to start with Chabon, and the way it talks about comic books and it reevaluates the whole idea of the superhero comic books, which is as low a popular or cultural form as possible, and considers the innovation within the form, the experimentalism and the ambitiousness within the form is brilliant. And it will make you, yes, it will make you look at all those popular artifacts, all those things you loved as a child and everybody told you they were trash, and you will be able to say, hey, fuck it, they are culture too. Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay is also an awesome historical novel and an art-breaking book. If you are more into genre stuff, Well, post-postmodernism is very good with genres too, although in weird ways and not always. A good example of the way post-postmodern can use genres brilliantly is Chabon's Yiddish Policeman Union, which is a hard-boiled detective novel, which is also an alternative history science fiction novel, which is also one of the best novels of all times. It deals brilliantly with the ideas of escape from history, with the potential for creativity, for the imagination to evade the problems of everyday life, and also with the need eventually to face back the problems of everyday life, which is one of the main conundrums at the art of post-postmodernism. It's pretty heavy as far as the Jewish theme is concerned, but don't be a schmuck and don't let that turn you down. It shouldn't. It's fascinating. It's brilliant. Another incredible genre work, Zone 1 by Colson Whitehead, a zombie novel that has a strong ironical black humor element, and that it's incredibly post-postmodern in the way it is very much rooted in its genre, and it uses the staples and standards of its genre, but also implements on them without turning its back on the genre and without acting like a novel that it's literary and just so happens to have some speculative elements in them, like the book of so many contemporary writers do. You people sicken me. Margaret Atwood, I'm looking at you. So the last few books in this introduction to post-postmodern literature, that is just the books I like pretty much, because these are all my favorite titles, is Bleeding Edge by Thomas Pynchon, which is post-postmodern in many ways, in the ways it is postmodern and Pynchonian, quintessentially Pynchonian, but also has heart, if we want to reduce the whole matter to very simple terms. Not that the other Pynchon novels don't have art, even the most terrible ones like Crying Lot 49, like Gravity's Rainbow, but this one has more heart, but it also features brilliant reflections on the end of postmodernism and on this world. This novel is indeed quintessentially post-postmodern, if you ask me, for the way it handles popular culture, for the way it takes a stand in a way that it goes beyond the ideals of postmodernism, but it's also a lot a defense of postmodernism, and it points at the dangers inherent with rejecting the ideals of postmodernism, with doing what many people did and saying postmodernism was all caustic irony and it made us unable to love and to act with each other. Because, of course, the inherent dangers in this is pretending that you don't need irony anymore in today's world because we're all enlightened people, and we are not. We still need postmodernism proper a lot, and that is one of the reasons why postmodernism is so complicated as a category. Last suggestion is probably the heartbreaking work of Staggering Genius by Dave Eggers, which is another of those quirky books that are mix not really images but mix different things together. It has this ironical, very silly preface that goes on, and it's very ironical, and it discusses a lot of ideas of the distinction between fiction and non-fiction. And it has that kind of tension towards sincerity, which is still a bit problematic and in many ways feel completely unsincere. That is a staple of a certain kind of postmodern literature. It takes the legacy of David Foster Wallace and it puts it into a more comprehensible, more accessible form. It's also a great novel, even though it's not a novel at all in many ways. Read it. And since you're already reading the heartbreaking work, approach and know about Max Sweeney's, Dave Eggers' publishing house, which is so postmodern in everything it publishes, be them issues of its magazine, be it special numbers or books it publishes. It has all these quirky ideas, it has these issues that come in boxes and feature pamphlets and letters from the front of a war, and all of these things are single stories in this issue. It has issues where all-star writers write genre fiction, even if they normally don't write genre short fiction at least. It's amazing. Just take a look at what Max Sweeney is all about to get an idea of what postmodern fiction is. Two disclaimers. Number one, I've obviously ignored so many stuff, and I've obviously ignored only on the area of postmodern fiction that interests me the most, mainly what has to do with genres in general, with popular artifacts, with breaking genre boundaries and distinctions between different narrative media. Disclaimer number two, I didn't talk about David Foster Wallace. That is because of a series of reasons. Let's name just one. I don't think any of David Foster Wallace's works is a good introduction to postmodernism proper, even though some of his texts, like E Unibus Pluram, are actually kind of articulate what many believe to be the ideas behind the postmodern thought, and so many scholars have talked about his contribution to this whole area, so know about it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know if you know any of these books, if you've read any of these books, what you think of them, and if you would suggest different books, other books, as introductions to postmodernism. I'm going to cough my lungs out now in the other room. Thank you for watching once again. I will see you in the next one. Coming up next, reviews of Mason and Dixon by Pynchon and of a postmodern classic. Bye, guys. Ah, the pain.